helping to contextualize the work that we're doing. If you could just give me a moment, I would just like to share my screen. Please shout if you cannot see, sorry, if you cannot see the screen. But yes, my presentation is mainly going to be in technically two parts. One of them will largely just be speaking to circular economy and waste management and the shift from policy to action and the role that Eclair Africa has been playing in supporting the landscape, but also what we've been observing and seeing from the various cities that we work with, including Cape Town and Accra, who are represented in today's session. And then the second part of it will lean more towards the action side with an overview of some of the examples of the work that we've seen come through. The first thing I wanted to start off with is just a contextualization and a framing of what the circular economy is, just because although a lot of us in the room are familiar with it, in case anyone is not necessarily familiar, I wanted to give that, that general overview of what it is. Essentially, the circular economy is a sustainable economic model that aims to prioritize the minimization of waste and resource consumption in our cities or environments by utilizing resources more efficiently. And so unlike your traditional linear economic model, which you can see at the bottom of the screen, the circular economy then tries to challenge this and say, how can we look at retaining closed loops for as long as possible? What the linear economy is basically what you're seeing there, which is you start off by taking materials from the ecosystem, and then you make them into products during the production phase, and they turn into waste. And from there, they end up in at the end of life in typically landfill sites and dump sites, or dumped across our environments. But what the circular economy then asks is for us to shift this model. And basically what this then starts looking like is the application of various frameworks on what the circular economy is in order to help us to promote practices such as sharing, leasing, reusing, repairing, refurbishing, rethinking, how we use our resources. And so towards the left of the screen, you can see a circle here, and this is basically drawn from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and it's a framework that they basically developed to help simplify what the circular economy is. And so we're basically shifting away from this linear model into one that says, how can we regenerate our natural systems by working with nature? How can we design out waste and pollution? How can we keep products and materials in use for as long as possible? And so based on this, we know that there are quite a number of frameworks that can then be applied to help reach these goals of transitioning from a system that is linear to one that is circular. And what I've included at the top of the screen is just some highlights from the insights that we've come to while doing work with various cities across the continent to basically understand how they view the circular economy and what roles they see themselves playing. And so at the top, you'll see a remark that we really love that's been shared by engineer Solomon Noy, who will be presenting quite later in a lot of the engagements that we had. And for him, what we got whenever we'd speak about circular economy with him was that shift from the diversion of organic waste leading to cleaner non-organic waste streams, and them seeing a role that they play within cities as agents that help realize the vision, where there's an already established network of actors who are helping to recycle materials like your plastics, but what happens to your organic waste? And so cities seeing themselves in this space helps us to better understand how we can make this vision of a circular economy realized or applied in our cities. And so in this diagram, I just wanted to then simplify what that all means. Is we have this linear model, and then we turn it into one that is circular. What you're seeing here is a framework that Eclair Africa then drew and that built on a lot of the frameworks and the research that had been emerged around 2020. And this turned into a framework that we then apply because it was then tailored largely to what we're seeing as key needs from the cities that we work with. And so it basically then tries to identify intervention points across the linear economy to help facilitate that transition into circularity. So how can we apply principles such as rethinking and regenerating our systems at the very early stages of the circular economy? How can we reduce and reuse materials at the stage where we make products, and then how can we recover materials when we reach the end of life? So instead of products going to landfill sites, how can we then shift that thinking and adopt recovery mechanisms in order to reintroduce materials back into the system? And what this then looks like is this circular diagram here, which basically interlinks all of these principles, and we have ideas around rethinking, and this is about redesigning our systems so that we apply a circular approach. It's also about regeneration, which is how do we then harmonize with nature? How do we apply nature-based solutions when we are designing our cities? How can we reuse materials by keeping them in circulation for as long as possible? And here you'll typically see that some of these principles work quite well together. So reuse would then work quite well with rethink. How do you then rethink your system so that you design products that are reusable? And then the fourth one was reducing. How do we reduce the amount of materials that we extract from our environment? And then how do we close these loops through the recovery of materials? Through the research that was being conducted, we had really interesting conversations with various stakeholders, and something that kept on emerging was the fact that circular approaches and principles are not necessarily new to the African continent and the ways in which many of us work. And so Kariuki Waweru, who is from Kenya, highlighted that circularity has always been happening, but without the framework of a circular economy. And so when we have terminology like this coming on board, how do we make sure that it makes sense for the context that we're in? How do we then apply it to the African continent and context? And so that was the thinking behind this framework, which was kept quite generic, but through various mechanisms and tools that you'll see come out in some of the examples that I share, we then started delving into how you help to make or how you help to realize this vision of a circular economy where we use our resources in a more efficient manner for the benefit of our cities and their users. Something that also emerged quite strongly was that cities are drivers of circularity and the circular economy, and can play a critical role in this transition. A lot of the research was showing that cities are consuming quite a lot of resources. So they consume about 75% of the world's natural resources. We're also seeing that they are also responsible for about 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And cities also produce about 50% of global waste that is currently in circulation. And so this started to raise questions around what we can do at the city level in order to address these challenges. Below this diagram here were just further statistics that helped to contextualize the gravity or importance of taking action as soon as possible rather than later. If we just go to the last point there, it was noting that about 40% of air pollution impact comes from the activities that we're having. And we're also seeing more than 90% of global water stress, as well as land-related biodiversity loss because of the ways in which we are managing our resources. And so that was simply just a call to encourage cities to start taking action and start figuring out how they can adopt circular economy approaches. And while it's very clear that the data says we need to adopt a circular economy approach, it's important to note that there are a lot of challenges that cities then face in trying to adopt circularity and various sustainability practices. When it came to policy, what we noticed across the continent was limited policy and capacity for effective uptake or implementation of the circular economy. And this came from limitations around enforcement and compliance of legislation, of policy and bylaws, even though in some contexts you would find that either there were guidelines in place for sustainable waste management practices, or these were coming up with the language around circular economy and how you can adopt circularity to address waste management challenges. We were also seeing inadequate political will and also changing mandates that did not allow for long-term continuity of these initiatives. One thing that I think many of us would be familiar with is the challenges that come from new terms coming up and becoming quite popular. And so when we were having these early discussions, something that was put on the table was the concern around circular washing and making sure that we support the uptake of circularity in a way that doesn't lead to circular washing, but actually gets embedded into systems in a practical manner so that there is longevity and we do see impact through various initiatives that are implemented. It was also not an easy one to do because there are quite a number of competing priorities, whether it's between circular economy, whether it's between various waste entrepreneurs, or even within at like say the local government level within departments. It was hard to make that case for circular economy when there are various pressing issues such as urban informality or health issues. And although a lot of them might be interlinked, trying to make that case and prioritization for allocating budgets towards realizing circular projects is a challenge that a lot of cities that we work with still continue to face at this stage. And also just the urgency to define circular economy implementation approaches was needed. Another key challenge that we saw cities facing was around accessible data for decision making. And this, I liked a quote that was shared by a colleague from an organization called GAIO, the Green Africa Youth Organization. He noted that circular practices have been in use in African cities for many years, but these are not well documented. And so they remain largely hidden. And so while data exists for a lot of the ideas that we want to implement, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, it's not put in a manner that is accessible so that we can make a case for why we want a circular economy approach to be taken on, or for why we want certain initiatives to be prioritized. And so there is an importance or a need to make that transition to better document our initiatives, but also to collect data that is relevant and useful for evidence-based decision making when it comes to resource use and efficiency. There were also other limitations to circular economy uptake, which included, like I've mentioned already, the limited policies and bylaws, and also the competing priorities. But despite this, what we are seeing is support at a global level to make these changes so that the policy environment is enabling and can support both local governments as well as other stakeholders who are seeking to support the transition to circularity. And so here what I have is just a slide that was compiled by a colleague that just highlights the global momentum for change that we see on the continent. So organizations such as the African Circular Economy Alliance have the African Circular Economy Facility, which is helping various governments across the continent to transition to circular economy, and they're doing that through roadmaps for African cities. There are various action plans that are being produced across various cities. We also have about 175 nations across the continent that are negotiating a legally binding global plastics treaty, which speaks to circular economy. Across the continent, we have about 75 countries that have published circular economy roadmaps, and over 40 countries that are embedding circular economy principles into their policies. And so this global momentum shows that there's a hunger and an interest for shifting the ways in which we look at circular economy and prioritizing it in cities and governments. And so what does this then look like when it comes to taking action? What I'm going to give now is just an overview of some initiatives by African local government authorities, but also some of these are embedded in projects that Eclair Africa has implemented to support local governments in their transition towards a circular economy. But before I get into the examples, I also just wanted to highlight that through the work that we've been doing, something that stood out was that there were a few entry points to the circular economy, and one of them was SMEs and the private sector. We saw that a lot of circular economy interventions are being led in the SME space, and so it was important to start encouraging local governments to create enabling environments for SMEs as well as the private sector to thrive, whether this was happening within local government itself or with support from national government structures. We also saw that there was an importance for or a prioritization for nature-based solutions and things such as natural asset mapping efforts in many cities because of that clear linkage between regeneration and harmonizing with nature as a vital part of the circular economy. But one that stood out quite strongly was the key tie between circular economy and waste management. A lot of you will have heard when people say things like circular economy is not waste management. But when we look at the context that we work in and the various priorities that our cities have, it's been quite natural that you have to address waste management, and it's easy to make those connections between circularity and waste management because it is a key issue in many of the cities that we are working with, and it's a priority. And so when you're faced with struggling to figure out how you can embed circular economy into local government, entry points such as waste management make it easy for us to do so. One of the ways in which at Eclair we thought this would be practical to resolve was through the development of a framework that was targeted at local government practitioners. And so we have what's called the Circular City Actions Framework, which is that linear diagram in the circle that I presented earlier that basically shows how local governments can make that transition from you have an idea, you have policies, and you'd like to then take that into action. What this framework does is it includes examples or guidance for the 5 Rs of rethink, regenerate, reduce, reuse, and recover, and gives guidance on how local governments can take action. So the framework encourages cities to expand the horizon of on local circular economy implementation and how they see it. So rather than focusing on just recovery, encouraging cities to apply the principles of rethink and regeneration when considering interventions. It also encourages cities to identify circular practices within their jurisdictions, so something that is tangible, that is localized and creates local impact. Also, another area of focus was that it was important to engage stakeholders in identifying circular economy interventions, and this comes from the point around supporting local businesses. And the last piece was in identifying best practices from peers, because like we said, there are a lot of circular practices that we do see taking place across the continent, but because they're not documented, it's hard to then know that circularity is happening. So through engagement such as peer-to-peer learning opportunities, cities can come together and share where interventions could be beneficial for another city. And so within the framework itself, there's a section that allows cities to basically map the different interventions that they have underway. Please excuse the beeping in the background if you can hear it. We are having a fire drill in the building. So right now I'm going to take us through 3 examples of how we can adopt how we can transition from policy to action in the circularity space. The first example that I'm going to highlight is the Circular Cities, the African Circular Cities Initiative. This was a program that Eclair Africa and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation hosted that helped cities to start thinking about how they can practically adopt a circular economy approach into their work. And so it included a training series on circular economy, and also a city exchange where cities came together to learn about circularity. And what emerged out of that work was a collection of a number of case studies and insights into how cities are taking circular economy forward. And since then, we've seen how cities such as eThekwini, which is in South Africa, have learned from City of Cape Town and Accra and Lilongwe and have started implementing those ideas in how they are defining their circular economy journey. And there are so many other examples of that as well. In the second project that we have, which is known as the Gap Fund Step Up project, ICLEI Africa has mainly supported 4 local governments across the continent, 2 in East Africa and 2 in North Africa, to take their project ideas from concept phases into implementation phases. And so while these cities are going on a journey with the Gap Fund, through the Step Up program, we've basically been finding the gaps within the work that they're doing and trying to see how those can be bolstered so that the projects that these cities are looking to implement can then be taken forward. But here you will see quite a number of really cool initiatives that the cities have sought to implement. And one really cool one comes from Uganda, where a municipality called Makindye is doing really cool work in trying to adopt a circular economy approach to municipal waste management. So they're adopting approaches such as briquetting, black soldier fly farming, and a number of other technologies to basically divert organic waste from landfill sites. Uganda, prior to us starting the Step Up project or even its conclusion, had their landfill site collapse. And so this project was one that was quite timely because it gave them the resources to start thinking about how they can then take this concept from the idea phase into the implementation phase. And what's important about this example is how the city is going from, we have an idea, and they're taking themselves through this journey of trying to access the right resources towards implementation. And so seeing how they can partner with various stakeholders on the ground internationally to help realize a vision for adopting a circular approach to waste management. The last example I want to highlight is one that's taking place here in Cape Town in South Africa. And this one was previously led by the Urban Sustainability Unit within the City of Cape Town, and now has really key support from a unit called the Mayoral Urban Regeneration Program within the city itself. What's really cool about this project is that it's a tangible example of how something goes from just concept into actual implementation. The City of Cape Town had gone through quite a long journey of identifying a piece of land within a site in the city that is underutilized, and recognizing that there are a lot of interventions that could be implemented there to turn the space into a learning campus. And so they wanted to build a sustainability campus on the site, and through support from various stakeholders and partners, we have been able to establish a circular farm on this piece of land. It is the first pilot project that is taking place on this piece of land, but it's basically demonstrating how waste from surrounding neighborhoods can then be taken onto this piece of land and valorized. So the organic waste is getting used by black soldier flies that are processing this organic waste, and therefore growing larvae, which can then be fed to chickens that are also getting grown on site. And because they have this high protein content, they are producing really great eggs that are then getting sold. But the byproducts that come from the black soldier flies, as well as from the chickens through their droppings, are then getting turned into a compost, into compost that can then either be used to revitalize the soil on the ground for growing plants that are produced within urban spaces, so urban food production, or that can then be sold off to various users, either for garden use or for other urban farming practices. And so it's a really cool initiative that shows how an idea can start off as one thing and then can then manifest as a project that is implemented that actually has tangible benefits and impacts within the city. although I did not touch on some nature-based solutions examples, I'm going to send a link in the chat to some examples of how you can adopt nature-based solutions to applying circular economy interventions within cities. Thank you. Back to you, Ruby.
Thank you so much, Chukuru. Wow, that was a lot to take in, and really, really informative. And I thought it was so interesting what you said about how circular approaches are not new. It's something, you know, cities have been, and African cities have been doing, but we maybe haven't like used that terminology to describe it. And I think that's something that we often say about nature-based solutions as well. It's not new. It's something cities have already been doing for a while, and African cities have been doing, but it's just putting this terminology there, then like, you know, kind of, naming something that's already going on and like the significance of that. Or so, I thought that was really interesting. And it was really great also to see, you know, like what ICLEI Africa is doing. And I think it would be really helpful, maybe for some of the initiatives and the resources that you mentioned, maybe you can just post them in the chat as well, so people can, if they want to read them, read further. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Rosina, and we're going to hear a little bit more about the practical, on the ground operationalizing of something like a waste strategy. So over to you, Rosina.
Well, thank you.
We aren't seeing. Oh, there we go. We can see.
Can you hear me? Now. Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible enough?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rosina Lesweta, the newly appointed Manager for Waste Minimization and Circular Resource Economy for the City of Cape Town. My presentation will be a bit different based on, my presentation will be a bit different because at this point, I will not be presenting the practical examples. As you might have picked up that I only joined this office in June, but that is not an issue. What I'm trying to elaborate here is that the the new waste strategy was only adopted in March. In as much as we have been busy with other circular economy and waste minimization initiatives, there are specific action plans within the waste strategy which are still under implementation, or some have been planned because we've categorized them in terms of the short, medium, and long-term priority. Therefore, this presentation is mostly aligned to the point of exploring what institutional policy and governance levers need to be pulled to enable sustainable interventions. The city has recognized this approach, rightfully so. Jukuda's per presentation, circular economy has been there, but mostly we've been doing, obviously based on our mandate of collection, sorting, landfilling, and recovery. We've been limited and not fully involved in the circularity. Hence, the city's approach was to look into how do we best incorporate that in our daily operations. What can the city do, or what can municipalities do to play a role in the whole circular economy? This will mean that the city will not only be focusing as in circular economy as waste minimization. It's quite broad. It goes beyond waste minimization. Hence, our approach or our action plans in the waste strategy also include other directorates like the spatial planning, future planning and resilience, and other servicing departments. The strategy itself was adopted or approved in March 2025. 2 months later, I was appointed as the manager, as I've alluded. And this appointment means there's a new branch altogether of waste minimization. We had this branch before, but there was a need to look beyond waste minimization, which meant the total restructuring. We've had waste minimization, but now we have restructured the branch to focus solely on waste markets with a separate role of looking into the market, because it is all and good to can implement the systems to divert waste, but if the markets are not receptive of that particular waste stream, and if cities are not doing enough to make sure that the markets are receptive, then we might as well not go through and divert our waste at all if it will eventually end up at our disposal sites. And we've had a branch or a section that was called drop-offs. We have now changed it into the community recycling centers, because somehow we are trying to rework the mandate of that branch to be more community facing. And there will be other functions as well that are added in order to fulfill the mandate of the secularity within the city. Understanding our role as being limited from waste, which is collection, we've also took it upon ourselves to participate in the upstream part. Chukwudi, you've correctly alluded to the whole circularity process. It starts with designing of products until such time that it's actually waste, and then when it's waste, that is where you find municipalities participating in recycling. But in actual fact, we should be looking way before it becomes waste. We have representatives in the SA Plastic Pact, which is a private initiative for manufacturers and brand owners to look at problematic waste and unnecessary plastic packaging. We are sitting in that forum in order to, we advise and be in a better position to understand what is happening on the other side, because that will inform the benefit, how beneficial those packaging will be as soon as they are now on the other side. Therefore, it's important for us to understand. Hence, I've deliberately indicated the issue of the market. What is it that the generators are preparing? What is the composition, recyclables in that particular container or packaging material that will still render the particular packaging to be beneficial as soon as it becomes waste. So that is where we are also sitting on the upstream part. And again, we are looking at symbiosis. This has been happening for a while now, but there is need for us to renew our commitment with business in terms of ensuring that the business exchanges material between different businesses is quite supported by the city itself, because this is where we see material flowing from one business to the other, and how that particular material is accepted and reused or repurposed by the other business. We also support the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa for eliminating, particularly on the food waste stream. There are various projects that are currently being run, but then we also have representation to make sure that consumers are well informed in terms of the ugly food. Aesthetics matter. If we do not go out there and educate our communities in terms of what we term ugly food, it will end up being waste. Therefore, there are various mechanisms and programs from that Consumer Goods Council to make sure that we eliminate food waste. Everything else is happening, we are also in the process of reviewing the policy and bylaw as informed by the new waste strategy. There are some changes there, as you will see in my next slide. It was therefore important for us to go back and review our bylaw and our policies to incorporate those changes, particularly with regard to the circular economy. On this slide, I'm not going to speak to each and every one of them, but what is important here is to illustrate that the waste strategy has identified different action plans that are aligned to specific opportunity areas. And from those opportunity areas, we identified objectives to support those opportunity areas. Looking, for instance, at how we can integrate the private sector We have identified 3 objectives, which is enabling economic opportunities in the waste sector. It goes beyond waste management itself, but we are collaborating with other stakeholders within the city. And at the same time, how do we coordinate basic service delivery within the city? And sharing of responsibilities, that is very much important, because at the end, we need to have communities or other role players taking ownership of the waste initiatives within their areas of responsibilities. On the actions that are supporting waste minimization that are aligned to the private sector integration, I have highlighted the ones in greens because these are what we have already started working on that will fall within the immediate or short term. In this instance, it will be between 1 to 2 years. I hope there will be an opportunity for us to come back again and present on how we have managed to implement some of these action plans in about a year or so. I'm going to zoom in specifically to the first one, which is about identifying economically feasible beneficiation waste streams. Remember, as local government, our mandate is to ensure that we create an enabling environment for the private sector to thrive. That will mean, hence I've indicated the review of bylaws. What is it that we are doing to eliminate the red tapes to ensure that the private sector has access? Our bylaws are prescribing in terms of who owns the waste, who's supposed to be handling the waste. So for us to look into those instruments to ensure that we also provide access to the private sector to gain access and utilize the waste in the beneficiation space. We have another process of ensuring that our waste processors are being accredited. We are also looking into how best do we make sure that we are able to accredit them so that they can be able to participate and benefit from other initiatives as companies that are accredited. The integration of waste pickers, Jokudi also touched on that one. This is an ongoing program, but we are still in the process of integrating them. And what is important in terms of integration is to try to come up with a custom-made service offering. And that will mean the current operations needs to be considered whenever that we are planning a new service in the area to make sure that we localize that specific service offering, because it cannot be a one size fits all. There are different dynamics per community. So it is important for us to make sure that we touch base with what is happening actually on the ground before we can implement those particular projects. And on the issue of SMME, one of the actions is to include capacity training component to accelerate SMME involvement in the waste beneficiation, particularly looking at city opportunities. We have SMMEs who are participating, but to what extent are we creating an environment for them to be eligible to be part of our own processes as the city? Hence this important action of ensuring that we include capacity training. I haven't highlighted it yet because it's not one of the, we haven't started with this yet, but that is also one action that we are mostly depending on our sister departments to assist us with. As I've said, this is not only about waste, it's about collaboration with other directorates and the private sector. Hence, what I forgot to mention when I started is that this is not the City of Cape Town waste strategy, but is the Cape Town waste strategy, which means everyone has got a role to play and it cuts across all stakeholders. Another opportunity area that we saw as a lever to ensure circularity within Cape Town is education and awareness. And by that we mean we need to come up with customized or target-based evidence-based communication plan to ensure that we respond particularly to specific issues that are affecting communities in as far as the circular economy is concerned. And one of the actions is to package the circular interventions as a circular Cape Town. It's got nothing to do with waste management, but is about packaging all circular interventions of the city to make sure that we produce one document of a circular Cape Town. And the city itself, in terms of its own operations and services, we need to look at how we procure our services. I've made an example of refuse bags. What is it that we are doing? We also need to take some initiatives in terms of how we procure goods and services to support circularity. And yeah, that will also include the supply chain management process. And we also have this green action plan, green procurement action plan, which is also providing guidance in terms of how do we go about procuring goods and services. What we have also initiated now is to come up with this innovative procurement with partners where we are looking at particularly PROs. We understand that there are supply chain management policies that we cannot go against, but it is also important for us to make sure that we bring our partners on board and we procure their goods and services, particularly the producer responsibility organizations, because they have a specific mandate and target to work with cities. But then in order for us to make sure that we do not flaunt supply chain management process, we have partnered with one of our NGOs to assist and our National Treasury. We are looking at how do we come up with innovative procurement with our partners. This has started. We are anticipating a report to be concluded by June 2026. Continuing with education and awareness, we also need to host
Rosina,
roadshows. Hello?
sorry to interrupt you. Hi, sorry. I just want to say, if you don't mind, I'm just looking at the time because we need to
Okay.
allocate like we said about 15 minutes for each presentation. So maybe in the next 2 minutes you can
Yeah,
just
this is
wrap
my
up
last
so we
slide.
still have time. Oh, okay, amazing.
This is my
Great.
last slide. Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
So still on education and awareness, we are looking at how do we bring everyone on board. We are looking at sub-councils and our city improvement district is our own way, our own system here within Cape Town where we are working with city improvement districts. But then what we are saying here is that we need to bring everyone on board. It responds to the issue of ownership that I've indicated. This is also one of the actions that we need to carry out. And the next opportunity plan will be on infrastructure. After everything has been said, do we have infrastructure? How do we go about ensuring that we develop infrastructure to support organic waste diversion? Therefore, we continue to provide our residents with infrastructure that will support organic waste diversion. And we are also in the process of developing an organic waste implementation plan, specifically looking at the reduction of organic waste to the disposal for land to the landfill site. Apologies. And the last one will be on partnership. How and when do we create partnership? We need to share responsibilities and simplify the process to work with non-city actors within the waste value chain. What we are saying here is that we need to continue to build relationships. I've spoken about the PROs, not only them, but there are other stakeholders again within the city, outside academia, and the NGOs and NPOs. We need to make sure that we create partnerships with them to make sure that at the end we are in a position to meet circularity. So therefore, this will mark the end of my presentation. But what is important from this, as I've alluded, is that most of these action plans are still ongoing. Hence, I could not specifically zoom into one to say, looking at this particular one of EPR or PROs, this is how we've done it. But some of the work is already in progress, and we are hoping to come back and report again to to share it with other cities out there. Thank you so much. I hope I've done the 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Rosina. This was so interesting. And I think, yeah, it's really great to get an understanding of the practical, the practical nuts and bolts of what it actually means to set up a strategy like this and how the city of Cape Town is thinking about it. Yeah, and moving from waste just as a collection service and really thinking about the systems and designing waste out of the system. So I think it's really interesting to see that, and we definitely will want to hear from you in a year or two once you've really started to implement some of these strategies and to see how they start panning out, and for other cities to learn from that. So it's really exciting to see what Cape Town's doing. Obviously, I'm biased because I live here, so I'm very interested to see how it pans out in the next few years. Okay, well, thank you so much for that. And we will hand over now to Anna from Nipefagio to give us a bit of a taster of what this means from a community perspective, and the Nipefagio zero waste model that's going on. So over to you, Anna. And just a note on sticking to like 15 minutes if you can, just so that we still, a little bit less, just so we can still grab a few minutes for questions at the end.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone. I hope you can see my slides right now. Okay. So my name is Anna, yes, from Nipefagio. We do zero waste implementation here in Tanzania. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Nipefagio is a local NGO, and we have a strategy that is based on 3 pillars. The first one is data. So we collect a lot of data to achieve impact and to be able to then advocate for effective policy, which is the second pillar, and we advocate for policy at the national, the regional, and the global levels. And then we also have transformative action, which is the third pillar, which is where, well, the zero waste implementation actually touches each one of the pillars, but obviously there is a lot of action in it. We have a zero waste map in Tanzania, which includes implementation in Dar es Salaam, in Arusha, in Tanga, and in Zanzibar, and Mwanza is yet to come, but it's baking currently. And the zero waste principles that we follow are basically that the model that we have needs to benefit people and the planet. So we need to make sure that we have social and environmental benefits aligned. It is a decentralized model, so it's less dependent on the overwhelming public services and less dependent on government management of every single piece of the implementation. And it's awareness building so that people can understand that not all kinds of waste are the same, that there are differences, that they need to make better choices, and all of that. We follow the waste hierarchy, obviously, and this is the zero waste hierarchy. And so we have the things that are acceptable and unacceptable. So rethinking, redesigning, reducing, reusing, and repairing are the preferences. And then after that, recycling what is possible, disposing what we cannot do anything with. And there are certain solutions that are unacceptable, like burning, waste to energy, chemical recycling, and all of those pieces. We believe that the circularity can only be achieved, and is only a goal when we reduce the extraction of new materials from the planet. So if the circularity is not actually extending the life to ensure that that happens, and is not reducing the extraction, then it's not a real circularity. We also follow the 5 environmental justice principles, which is the social aspects that I was talking about. So we need to respect the planetary boundaries and ensure that we have intergenerational equity. We need to ensure participation and respect for all waste speakers and waste workers. We definitely enhance inclusion and build from local knowledge. We believe that there is a lot of local knowledge that we can expand, and then respond to pollution and environmental harm with accountability, and support holistic solutions that enable systemic change. So the main goal of everything that we are doing is systems change. If it's not, again, not changing the system, we are not actually achieving the goals that we have. So how does it work in Tanzania? we have innovation, we have employment, we have justice as three main goals here and main ways of working. And I have a video here that I hope is going to work. So let me know if you cannot hear.
Waste management is a serious concern in Tanzania due to the unregulated production of plastics and the lack of adequate waste management services and infrastructure. Zero waste is the path to systemic change and contributes to solving several pressing human challenges: global warming, the plastic crisis, and environmental and social injustice. The zero waste model starts with segregation of waste at the household level and includes decentralized material recovery facilities. Our zero waste model achieves 100% waste collection in low-income neighborhoods, using less than 15% of the estimated municipal budget. Waste fees are collected through an app, providing transparency and accountability. The zero waste model diverts 70 to 85% of waste from landfills, with the potential to reduce environmental impacts and methane emissions by up to 95% by 2030. Zero waste is not just a solution. It is a commitment to a more inclusive future for Tanzania, the East African community, and beyond.
So let's move on. Okay. So this video is the teaser of a much longer documentary that we have done in Tanzania that basically shows how zero waste implementation happens in Dar es Salaam, in Zanzibar, and in Arusha as well. That's before Tanga. So these were the three cities that were part of the documentary. And it has a lot of information about both how it's happening, but also the policy aspects, the government aspects, and everything. So who are the people who actually make this happen? The cooperatives and the communities. And you can see here the cooperatives in action doing the collection. And we have active community participation. As I was mentioning before, if you don't have social aspects, you don't have social inclusion, then you're not achieving the goals. So the community involvement goes from the household level to schools, to local businesses and everything. We have material recovery facilities that we built for each community. This is one of them for Zanzibar. Each material recovery facility is different because it needs to adapt to the land that we have available and the needs of the community. And this is one of them full. And basically the way that it happens is that when waste is generated at the source, we then have segregation. So in 4 categories, we have organic waste, we have recyclables, we have domestic hazardous waste, and we have residual waste. Those are segregated at the household level, local businesses, schools, wherever it is. And then we have the waste cooperatives that follow a schedule and they go house to collect that. Once they collect, then take it to the local material recovery facility where they further segregate the waste and then store the waste appropriately. We have all the organic waste being composted in the local material recovery facility, and most of the material recovery facilities also have black soldier flies to also be able to handle the very large volumes of waste that we have in Dar es Salaam. When the recyclables reach the minimum amount for a truck to come and collect, then that's when the recyclables go to the local companies that are going to recycle them. And we also have the residual waste, which is the waste that we don't have anything to do with, and includes the domestic hazardous waste. Those go, in the case of Dar es Salaam, to the dump sites. We don't have a landfill. In other cities, they go to a landfill. Also, only the number of trips that is needed to basically be able to manage that. So as I mentioned, these are the 4 different categories. We have regular data collection. So basically the waste collectors, they measure the waste when they are collecting from the households, they weigh it, and then they also weigh the waste when they reach the material recovery facility. We have consistency in the schedule. That's why people actually believe in the model. So they know that when the collection is supposed to happen, it's going to happen. And obviously we follow all the legislations for health standards and everything because our material recovery facilities are inside the communities. We have obviously a care for cost because the model needs to be low cost. So we have a system to ensure that that works financially speaking. So if we have hand carts that the waste collectors use, they have the protective gear that they need, and they have the communities have the bags and the containers that they also need. And so it basically ensures that there is respect. One of the main things for us is also about the way that the waste collectors basically get reintegrated into the community and are able to do their work and have a social impact. So these are some of the byproducts that we have. So we have the composting right in the middle. We have the black soldier flies on the top right. We have the recyclables on the top left. And we have the residual waste, which is the waste that we cannot do anything with, on the bottom right. And our amazing waste collectors right there. Some of the achievements that we have in about 7 years of implementation, as the video mentioned, we were able to use less than 50% of the annual budget projected by the municipality for each neighborhood. We have engaged more than 120,000 people. We reduce in each community between 75 and 85% of the waste to dump site or to landfill, depending on where it is. We create about 30 jobs per community. So 30 jobs per neighborhood, and we achieved, which is what I'm very proud of, 95% compliance to segregation at source in each one of our communities. So it's a lot of waste that is being collected. This is one example here. It's about 39 tons a month, and this is how it's distributed. And you can see that we have a lot of organic waste. And that's one of the reasons why it's important to decentralize, because it's much easier to handle 38 tons at a time than it would be to handle 168,000 tons at a time, which would be if the collection was centralized. We have a plan for scalability. We also have a market now. We have a zero waste market in which you do all the collection, the composting and everything at the market. We have 4 communities that are fully operational, now actually becoming 6 before the end of this year, likely 7, but for sure 6. And we have several communities in implementation. We also have a new implementation stream, which is something that I have been working on since 2017. Actually, which is the Misimbasi River, which is the main river basin of Dar es Salaam. This is some of the mapping that we have done, and we are finally going to start implementing right there. So we have a projected impact, and this is just for Dar es Salaam to show how much this implementation can increase its impact if it's scaled successfully. So we have really, really a lot to do. And in terms of systems, again, we are advocating for a hybrid system. The centralized system doesn't work financially speaking, doesn't work in management ways, doesn't work in terms of job creation, doesn't have the social and environmental aspects that we are looking for. And it relies on historical patterns that have shown that they are not successful. And so if we can have a decentralized system, eventually when the city decides to create, the Dar es Salaam now has a plan to have landfills and transfer stations, then we can have a hybrid system in which all the collection from the household all the way to the material recovery facility handles all the organic waste, creates the jobs and everything, and then gets integrated into the transfer stations later on. In terms of the financial model, people always ask, again, as the video said, we have an app so that we ensure that everything is transparent, that we have proper records of everything. And we finally, after several years, we now have consistently achieved a positive balance. So you can see here the revenue from the several different streams of revenue that each one of the communities have. This is obviously one example. But we have different ones for other places, and these are the costs. So it's not a huge profit, but this basically includes the payment of all the waste workers and all the costs. And so whatever it is that remains becomes investment for the cooperatives to be able to expand their financial capacity. And so we are always thinking about diversification for resilience. So we ensure that, like the waste collection fees, for example, they will vary along the year, how much people can afford, depending on how good or how bad the economy is. So diversifying is very important. So these are some of them, and there are others that we are always exploring. And then we have the climate impact. This is a case study that has shown that we can actually reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in Dar es Salaam by 65% just with zero waste implementation, if we don't do anything else. And so this is huge, and the study is available in case anyone would like to read it. It's online. And basically, a lot of the waste in Dar es Salaam is organic waste, which means that makes absolutely no sense to try to transport rotten tomatoes to a landfill or to a dump site that is about 30 kilometers away. Going to the importance of all of these, we can see that we have lighthouse projects in action. These are just some of them. There are many, many, many others. But that's basically what happens when you have people doing things in coordination, and together you are able to actually prove that the model works not just in one region or in one city, but it actually works across the globe. These are some of the examples of places where it's working, and there are again many others. Challenges, obviously, the implementation of highly centralized waste management systems. This is one of the things that the government is always pushing for. So we need to always be fighting for the decentralization. We have the I'm not going to read all of those. You can see the presentation later, but I'll highlight the most important. I think the inconsistent cash flow is something that we need to both scale up and also diversify to solve. And then we have financial resilience. We also have a public demand for waste management, and the government tends to attend that demand in a way that is not through models that take a little bit longer to be implemented, which is important. And in terms of scaling, one of the things that we need is land, availability of land for the local material recovery facilities. And so this is something that we rely on the government to be able to have. Again, the economy of scale has a very significant role in reducing the impact of the inconsistent cash flow, and we can still have something to explore which is the integration of food systems and food prevention in the zero waste model. That's what we are doing in the markets. We started the markets last year. It's going extremely well, and it has been saving actually more than 50% of the money that was used for waste management in the market. So there is a lot of things, a lot of opportunities to expand and integrate, and things that can be done in terms of enabling scale. There are also several global agreements to reduce methane emissions, as we are all aware of, and those can, like zero waste, basically that's what we do from the very basic start of things. So yes, zero waste around the world has a lot of places, as I just mentioned, and we are constantly learning from each other and ensuring that we can do this well and we can keep growing. And I will end by saying that when people are given a good choice, they take it, but we need to provide them with the option so that they can actually do it. Otherwise, we cannot blame them for how waste mismanagement is happening in their cities. And with that, I say asante nisana. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's so interesting, and it's amazing what Nipefagio has managed to achieve through your zero waste model. Yeah, and it's so interesting to know like the impact that it has to the city. And I think like firstly, I think it would be really great if you can share the link to the study that you mentioned, if you don't mind, if you can share that in the chat, and maybe to the longer documentary video that you mentioned about how the zero waste model works. Yeah, I think the idea of decentralizing waste management is really interesting. And you said, you mentioned some of the benefits of it being community driven, and I think that's really significant. And it kind of really ties into the idea of people first and working with communities. Yeah, kind of meeting the informal economy where it is. And yeah, I think it seems like a really viable approach, and something that we can all learn a lot from. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Yeah, and I see the time is just ticking away. So I'm not sure if we're going to have time for a solid question and answer session at the end, but we definitely would like to hear from our next speaker, Engineer Solomon Noy, who is coming to us from the Waste Management Department in Accra, and is going to share some insights about implementing waste management in the city. So Solomon, thank you so much for joining us. And we hand over to you. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we hear you perfectly.
Yes, so I'll be brief and snappy so that we save some time for the other participants online. Yes, so to cut a long story short, I don't have presentation, but just to go straight to the point. For the city of Accra, we, through our climate action plan, have long known that we generate close to 60% of our municipal solid waste being organics. And therefore, once we set out to divert about solid waste from the landfill sites, we realized that targeting the organic waste is the key. And so we did a lot of studies in that direction, which is our waste composition and characteristics. And then we analyzed all that and went into nitty-gritty our organic. Realized that the organic waste in itself is deficient in carbon, which is the carbon to nitrogen ratio that will be suitable for the production of compost in commercial quantities is lacking, and therefore we deployed to also delve further into rather using anaerobic digestion processes for production of biogas and possibly cleaning it up into CNG and then rather using the sludge or the digest it from the anaerobic process into composting back. So we are thankful through our partners, ICLE #1, COMSA #2, GIZ, and all of them, C40 cities, and we are making quite a headway. As we speak currently, we've been able to demonstrate to the citizens and the citizens of Accra that on-site systems are doable. On-site systems in composting and also in anaerobic digestion, where we've tasked the university close, the technical university have designed a local made home composter and will be distributing to individual homes and organizations for home composting. Also, we also demonstrated on-site anaerobic digestion plant right in our city hall, which is the for demonstration purposes, and it is connected to our restaurant where people can look at, because we are currently at the phase 1 of 3 phases that we intend to do in order to achieve this by 2030. Now I may say 2035, at the way I'm looking at issues. And so we have also reviewed our bylaw, where we are categorizing some organizations as bulk waste generators. The reason being that if you are an organization or a hotel or a restaurant or a chop bar, local food joint, and you are able to produce more than 100 kilograms of organic waste, you are categorized as a bulk waste generator, and you will not be allowed to put your organic waste to the municipal system that we have. And that is why we are demonstrating to them what they can do on their own through this on-site system. The next time I will bring photos and practical operations of such systems for you all to see. And so, based on this bulk waste generator system that we have introduced into our bylaw, once we kick in, the bylaw kicks in, anybody that is classified as a bulk waste generator will be expected to turn their organic waste into either compost or biogas through these smaller on-site systems. This we are doing to reduce the quantum that will definitely come for the commercial production of biogas or compost. So for the big markets, Accra, we have about 5 major markets, which serves as a market hub for most of our neighboring countries like Mali, all the landlocked countries bring their produce for market city of, and that is of over 5,000 metric tons per day. So currently, through ICLE, COMSA, as I've acknowledged them, we've procured a consultant, and they were here for their first mission in Accra just to look at the site that we have earmarked for the large-scale production of biogas. And we want to start with between 100 to 200 tons per day capacity plant, and then we can scale it up just to serve these huge markets and some companies like the farm milk or the dairy factory, and also the abattoir that is serving the city of Accra. The abattoir waste is also very good for generating organic waste. So they came, we took them through the site, and then we also visited most of our stakeholders at the ministries to look at the policy, directives, and what is required for such a municipal plant. And we also had the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, because this will require a full-blown EIA, environmental impact assessment study, and everything. We visited all of them, and then they armed themselves with what they need in order to come up with a pre-feasibility study that will also inform a feasibility study. And we are also encouraging them to look through this feasibility for the possibility of generating hydrogen gas apart from the methane gas with our organic waste. And we want to look forward to make sure that certainly once we start, there will be no turning back. They also visited a few of such small-scale plants, which was in our second city called Kumasi. And there they visited another biogas processing plant at a place called Jankoba. They have also instituted the possibility of getting hydrogen. And so we'll be learning from whatever they are doing, and then we will incorporate into whatever we are doing and scale it up eventually, because we are looking at more than 2,000 metric tons of organic waste that is generated within the city of Accra on a daily basis. And it will be very difficult to get a processing plant to be able to meet such capacity because of the sophistication, the land requirements, and so on and so forth. And that is what informed us to review our bylaw to introduce this bulk waste generator system, so that at least from the citizens' point of view, we will keep these volumes at a manageable rate so that we will not be overwhelmed. Because once we are able to do that, definitely the organic waste that may be taken to the landfill to generate methane gas and greenhouse gases will be eliminated. So for now, this is where we are. Feasibility studies are already completed for commercial scale production of compost. And we are waiting for finality on the engineering drawing, the designs, and then the possible procurement of a consultant to also look at the funding source to upscale such a composting plant. Because definitely once the compost plant is in place, all the digestives that will be produced from the biogas plant or anaerobic digestion process will be taken to the compost, and there will be closing in the loop so that there will be nothing that will be left to chance. Just like the immediate presenter said, we will be approaching a zero waste situation with regards to organic waste. For the other wastes, we are also handling them. We will intend to do pyrolysis plants to be able to turn the suitable plastics back into fuels. We just signed the MOU of that just yesterday. And then once we are able to do that, most of the other recyclables will find their way to the off-takers. And then the remaining non-recyclables, will think of a better way of managing them other than landfill, because we want to eliminate landfilling as much as possible as we can, though it is not so easy. That is where we intend to head towards. So thank you very much. This is a brief I have for you so that we are ready for further questions.
Thank you very much, Solomon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was really interesting to hear what Accra is doing. And yeah, it's interesting to see that you're also, again, employing like more of a decentralized way of managing waste, but almost putting it onto producers rather than kind of the more community level initiative that Nipefagio is running. It'll be interesting to see those two things coming together. And how much, organic waste could be collected if you have run those two things in tandem. So yeah, really, really interesting to hear what Accra is doing. Yeah, and I think it's so great to see that cities, realizing that there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of potential in waste and organics as well. And it's that idea of circularity, and it's not something just going out the system, but it's something that can be reused and turned into something else useful. So yeah, that was really interesting. I'm conscious of time. We have 3 minutes left. So I think we are not going to have time for questions today, unfortunately. And I've seen Anna is going to have to leave us at 3:30 precisely. So yeah, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat as of yet. So I think that we may have to call it for today, but it was so interesting to hear all of your perspectives, such different ideas and coming from such different places, but they're all really like building nicely into this idea of incorporating more circular practices into our cities. And if the presenters are able to share your presentations with us, we can share them onwards with our UNA cities and our community of practice and our cities who weren't able to attend today. And yeah, there's so many valuable things we can learn from all the initiatives that are taking place in Cape Town and Tanzania and in Accra. So yeah, we thank you for sharing your sharing all of this with us today. And I hope that all our attendees are feeling suitably inspired and yeah, are going to really take something from this webinar today. So thank you everybody for joining. And yeah, we hope to connect again soon. We hope to follow up on what City of Cape Town's achieving through the waste minimization strategy and checking in on Accra's initiatives and seeing how Nipefagio goes from strength to strength in the next few years. So maybe we'll have to have a recap in 2 years' time, see where everybody's at. So thank you everybody, and yeah, we'll connect again soon. Thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.